Hello guys, welcome to Flow in Design. This is the third chapter in our design foundations. We'll talk about what is flow in design, we'll talk about lines and counterlines and a bunch of other examples that will help you effectively understand the importance of flow in design, as well as the certain habits that you can actually create for yourself as an artist to break uniformity whenever you're working. Now, what is flow actually in design? Flow in design takes various forms in essence. So you can understand it when I say various forms, I mean exactly this. Whenever you're using a certain type of flow in design, it has to create either an empowerment of the shape language. So it's used to create an empowerment there. So you're pushing and pulling shapes. That's what I mean by it takes various forms. Or either flow in design, it can be part of a certain specific aerial design. For example, if we're speaking about environment, in that area you have a certain visual flow that creates the entire design context towards the audience itself. That's what I mean by it. In this topic itself, we will discuss things from a dynamic perspective. So what I said, like from a dynamism perspective, and also from a design perspective, which I explained earlier, what it actually means. Now, let's discuss about lines and counterlines. And what you have to understand here, this comes into like the idea of the habit of breaking uniformity. A lot of people have struggles or issues because they don't know how to break uniformity in different types of contexts. And what happens here is basically this. Flow can be influenced by a curve, multiple curves, lines, and even dots, which can create a hierarchy of importance in terms of what is primary, secondary, tertiary, and so on and so forth, and even focal points. Okay, because we're speaking about, like, when we speak about flow in design, we're speaking about the collective components that create your artwork to be standing together. We're not speaking only individually by parts, but we're speaking about a whole. And of course, the individually by parts, we'll talk about lines and counterlines in specific areas, and we'll showcase in the examples that are going to come up. All the mentioned components above are used to create general design flow and even suggest a differentiation in design, which builds a pillar in stylistic language. And this is something that you guys have to clearly understand, that stylistic language is heavily influenced by flow, meaning that whenever you simplify things, you have longer lines, and whenever you add more complexity, you have shorter lines. So if you think about when it comes to like flow itself, like a clarity of flow, will create a more stylized push. Whenever you have a more robust flow, it can actually create a more realistic push, because usually realism has a certain type of breakdown which is less dynamic. So if you look at reality, it's not very dynamic. If you look at a room or a space, it's not very dynamic. It's us people that create dynamic designs in essence, or dynamic contexts for those things to arrive there. That being said, let's go and discuss here what are these parts here when it comes to like what is a start point and an end point, right? So we're starting from A to B, and that creates like a certain type of curve. And here from A to B, it's a different curve, and this can be actually either from a gestural standpoint, if you want to think about it from a foundational gestural standpoint, but this can also be used to create a certain type of flow in design. And we have curves here, and we have various types of curves, like an S shape here, like an S curve. We have like a sort of like inverted U curve here, like a very different S curve here, like an opposite S curve. It helps you basically to understand that these type of curves are helping with certain areas. And of course that flow, what flow basically brings is direction, right? You have clarity of direction, where it's coming, where it's going, especially if you're designing some movement in your designs. It helps with designing a layout, like big, medium, small. So we can start like a flow that can a dynamic layout. It helps with building hierarchy of design importance and where you place the focal point. So depending on your composition, you can use it to place a focal point. It is a great way to organize your thought process and not go too far from the design intention as well. So these are the things that are actually helping out in what are bringing out. And here we have, for example, the idea of a curve and counter curve. So as we have line and counter lines, here we have a curve and a counter curve, another curve, and so on and so forth. you see how these are actually coming together. And you have multiple curves that create this dynamic component to it. Remember that curves and lines are useful at all time, not only in design, but even in other areas such as construction, hierarchy of elements, arrangement of various sorts, can be used on multiple areas of design in general, which makes this topic very important. And I don't know how much I could stretch, like, why is this so important? And as you see here, for example, the difference between curves, it gives it a better flow in general. When it comes to like using lines, it creates this aggression push, like clear push, clear pull, clear direction. It sends you directly there if it's very powerful like that. And same thing happens in this scenario where we have like this zigzag effect. This is often used either like in positioning elements like explosions, characters, and so on and so forth. But just to get a general idea, this is pretty much what happens with this component and the first part of flow and design. Let's go to the next part and we'll check out what's happening next. Thank you, and see you at the next part.